found a piece of metal about a foot and a half to 2 feet wide and about 2 or 3 feet long. It sounded like you had nothing in your hands. It wasn't any thicker than the foil out of a pack of cigarettes.
You're going to get a little earful from that gentleman in just a few minutes. Because on this episode of Spock Rock After Dark, we're going to study what the skeptics like to call qualified observers. Nobody who ever sees a UFO is a qualified observer. Except I have 4 gentlemen that fall under that category. And they're going to tell you in their own words about what they experienced. It's coming up in a few minutes. Then after that, we're going to lighten the mood a little bit with a top 5. The top 5 hardest substances on the planet Earth. So we'll give you a few minutes to get your list in order, get your Googling working, and we'll get things started. Because it's dark and nothing good ever happens until after dark. If you watched last week, or if you've listened to Boldly Pod at all over the past 7 years, you know I walk this fine line between being a believer and a skeptic within the idea of UFOs. I tend to lean towards the believer side. I do believe that aliens have visited our planet. Do I think they have made contact with us on an official capacity? No, probably not, but I don't really have any proof for that, so I can't say. But do I think a lot of these sightings out that people have made are possibly alien spacecraft from another planet or dimension? Yeah, I kind of tend to lean that way. And it's not just because of the sighting that I had in 1984. It kind of goes along the line of I take issue with having so many sightings by what the professional skeptics love to use as one of their major excuses that qualified observers are never anybody that has a sighting. And their definition of qualified observers are pilots, people in the military, police officers, people with a high standing in society, so they put it. Those type of people are, quote, qualified observers. And they always say that when they're talking about, for example, my sighting. I would not be a qualified observer because I was just a 16-year-old kid in my bedroom in the middle of the night in the summer of 1984. I would not be a qualified observer. What I saw is something that I still can't explain to this day. Am I willing to say it's an alien spacecraft? No, but I am willing to say that we didn't have the technology to maneuver like that thing did in 1984, not to mention in 2025. But am I going to say it was an alien spacecraft? No, I can't say that because I didn't see an alien come out of it. I didn't see an alien waving at me from the portal window of it or anything. I didn't even see if it had windows. I don't think it did. But I didn't see an alien, so I can't say it was an alien spacecraft. But the skeptics like to haul out the qualified observers, and they tend to always forget a lot of the sightings that have been made throughout history that have been made by qualified observers. They always make up a different excuse for those, but they always bring up the phrase qualified observers when it's not a qualified observer. They had to be mistaken. That's what I'll say. So we have a few that we're going to talk about on this segment. Starting off with probably the most famous of all UFO sightings in the history of UFO sightings. That's right. You said it before you were thinking it, before I've even said the word Roswell. When you say Roswell, even people that don't even think about UFOs will probably, unless they live in Roswell or New Mexico, they will immediately think UFOs and or aliens. Very qualified observers reported this, but yet the skeptics make up excuses. So, using their logic, a qualified observer, the second person to handle and witness the crash of whatever it was in Roswell in 1947 was a military officer by the name of Jesse Marcel. Here's what he said about what he witnessed. This is from the late 70s. And this is him talking about what he witnessed in 1947.
Found a piece of metal about a foot and a half to 2 feet wide and about 2 or 3 feet long. It sounded like you had nothing in your hands. It wasn't any thicker than the foil out of a pack of cigarettes. But the thing about that got me is that you couldn't even bend it. You couldn't dead it. Even with a sledgehammer would bounce off it. So I knew that I had never seen anything like that before. And as of now, I don't know what it was.
So there you have that. You heard Jesse Marcel talking about the stuff he picked up on the Brazel Ranch was thin, could crumple it up, and it would spring back to life. It was no thicker than a pack of foil in a cigarette container. They couldn't dent it. They couldn't burn it. They couldn't hit it with a sledgehammer. They couldn't do anything to rip it. Let him continue a little bit more.
One thing I was certain of, being familiar with all air activities, that it was not a weather balloon, nor an aircraft, nor a missile. It was something else of which we didn't know what it was. There were just fragments strewn all over the area, an area about 3/4 of a mile long and several hundred feet wide. So we proceeded to pick up the parts. A lot of it had a lot of little members with symbols. To me, I call them hieroglyphics because I could not interpret them, could not be read. They were just like symbols, something that meant something. These little members could not be broken, could not be burned. I even tried to burn that. Would not burn. That stuff weighs nothing.
So I would say he is a qualified observer, wouldn't you? But yet they really, and you would think that that would ruin his career. But on the contrary, he went to have a very illustrious career after that incident. If he made such a blunder, bumblehead mistake to misidentify a Raywinson or a weather balloon as an alien spacecraft, you would think it would ruin his career. But it didn't. He continued to serve in the intelligence wing of the Air Force until he retired. So, seems kind of sketch, as the kids say. They probably don't say that, but anyways. Another case that you may or may not have heard about, and I'm actually going to do an episode of Too Boldly Pod about the incidences that have happened like this next one sometime here in 2025, because the non observant UFO buff, it's probably the wrong way to put that. The passive UFO buff probably hasn't heard much about these sightings, but there have been numerous occasions where UFOs have been spotted over military bases that had nuclear weapons.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Salas. In 1967, I was a first lieutenant stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana. Sometime in the evening hours on March 24th, I received a call from one of my topside guards, the flight security controller, stating that they had been observing strange lights in the sky making odd maneuvers. He called back about 5 minutes later. This time he was screaming into the phone saying they're looking at an object, a red glowing object hovering just above our front gate. I went to wake my commander, Fred Mywald, who's taking a rest break, started to tell him about the phone call, and just as I told him, our missiles began going into what's called a no-go condition or unlaunchable. Essentially, they were disabled.
So, yeah, even though he will say that he didn't technically witness it, he was the person in charge. So his minions, his subordinates, I said minions, they did witness it. And he witnessed the radar. And he witnessed the nukes going offline for no reason at all. So yeah, qualified observer. And that's not the only time that's happened. That happened on the Soviet side of the Cold War as well, in the Ukraine, which I'll talk about later this year on Too Boldly Pod, because both of those stories are very fascinating when it comes to UFO sightings. And the third one is maybe not the second most popular UFO sighting of all time, but it's up there more times than not in the top 5. And that is the Rendlesham Forest incident from England in 1980, where this object, not just one night, not just 2 nights, but over 3 separate nights at the end of 1980, flew over and landed on a military base in England. Now, before we start, there were 2 bases at the time. Rendlesham was the forest that was kind of in between the English base, and on the other side was Bentwaters, or the American base. So there were 2 bases and a forest in the middle called Rendlesham Forest. Over 3 nights, there was and I'm going to do a podcast, Too Boldly Pod, about this too, because we're actually coming up on the 45th anniversary of that. So I'll probably do an episode with some audio as well, that if you're not aware of it, there's some very cool audio too. But here's the story of 2 of the military officers, one of which was a military police officer, talking about what they witnessed in December of 1980.
As we approach the forest edge, I'm starting to see a formation of a craft, triangular in shape. I have the feeling as well, this cannot be in any James book of aircraft. It's not an aircraft that was designed by anything on this planet. My emotions are all over the place. They're running from the gamut from being scared to in awe. I got my camera, I pop it out, I shot as much film as I could. I started looking underneath the craft. I thought I was curious. I was wondering, how is it sitting above the forest floor? And when I looked underneath it, I could see nothing but light on it, like white light. There was 3 indentions in the ground. inch and a half deep. Somehow this light created those indentions. When I was touching it, it was warm to touch. I later find out it had radiation.
And then also there were points where it seemed like everything was going in slow motion.
As the servicemen approached the strange lights, Sergeant Peniston reportedly saw a large craft just beyond the tree line.
The craft was triangular in shape, measuring about 6 to 7 feet high, black in color. I had come around to the far side of the craft, and that's when I noticed that there was, inscription on the side. It was about 3 feet long, maybe 6 inches high.
And a lot has been said about Jim Peniston over the past 45 years. Matter of fact, both of them have been kind of wrung through the dirt, so to speak. And if you go by the obsession, for lack of a better phrase, of the professional skeptics, they are by definition qualified observers. So what did they see? If you have thoughts, let me know in the comment section. So if you have any thoughts about qualified observers, let me know in the comment section. And I'd love to hear them. Honestly, I would, because the skeptics really, as much as I love to believe in a lot of things they say, it's stuff like that really leans me more towards the believability side. But we had some fun listening to all those qualified observers talk. Let's close the show off with something a little bit entertaining, a little bit lighthearted. And it is from the Top 5 of Anything site. And it is the top 5 hardest substances on the planet Earth. You probably can guess what number 1 is, but we're going to play the game regardless. At number 5 is orthoclase feldspar. See, I had to even look that up. I didn't even know what the hell that was. So apparently, I don't have any of that laying around the house. At number 4, and this kind of surprised me. I knew it was a rock mineral. I knew it was hard, but I didn't realize it was quite top 5 hard. I mean, not like Lou Ferrigno hard. At number 4, did I just say Lou Ferrigno? Never mind. Scratch that last 20 seconds. At number 4, the top 5 hardest substances on the planet Earth, it's quartz. At number 3, also something I'm surprised is as hard as it is. And I'm not talking about a certain wrestler. That's also a TikTok star. But I'm not pushing any buttons. Anyways, at number 3, I'm not even going to say his name because I don't want to get in trouble. At number 3 of the hardest substances on the planet Earth, it's topaz. Did you know that? At number 2, and of the absolute hardness scale, which goes from 72 to 1500, this is number 2 with 400, and whatever hardness scale is, I have no clue. It's corundum. If I'm even spelling that correctly, I have no idea. Never heard of it. And at number 1, with the absolute hardness scale of 1500, you all guessed it, because we all took our mom's wedding rings when we were a kid and scratched glass with them just to see if it was real. It's diamond. There's your top 5. The top 5 hardest substances on the planet Earth. And Steven Seagal wasn't one of them. And that wraps up episode number 2 of Spock Rock After Dark. In this episode, we talked about the absolute skeptics, the professional skeptics, and qualified observers. And we had a fun little top 5 list of the top 5 hardest substances on the planet Earth. If you have any thoughts, love to hear them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you're notified each time I drop a new episode. And it's dark out. And as we all know, nothing good ever happened until after dark. I tried to do an impression there. After dark. I think I am James Earl Jones.